Okay, we're good to go. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's Bloom Impact Investing webinar on the topic of investing opportunities in the circular economy and recycling. My name is Camille. I am the founder of Bloom Impact Investing, and I will be your host today. Before we start, I would love to acknowledge the First Nations people as the traditional owners on the land on which this meeting is taking place today, which for me is Meanjin, Brisbane. I recognize the country north and south of the Brisbane River as the home of both Turrbal and Jagera nations. I pay deep respects to the elders past, present, and future. Welcome again. It is a pleasure to see you all. For our new members today, please allow me to introduce Bloom and our Impact Investing Meetup group. At Bloom, we focus on the impact money can have in the fight against climate change. We are on a mission to make impact investing and sustainable finance easy and accessible. Part of this mission is to offer educational opportunities like these webinars to propel the voices of impact investing and sustainable finance experts far and wide. Since early this year, we have hosted many events, all touching on one or several sustainable development goals. You can have a look at our previous webinars. They are all available on our YouTube channel. Simply search Bloom Impact Investing in YouTube and you will find our previous recordings. So why are we meeting today? The aim of our webinars is to build a community of impact investors and agents of change so that together we can build a greener, more circular and inclusive economy. At Bloom, we think sustainable investing should be accessible to everyone. And we see a future where a carbon-free and inclusive economy allows people and the planet to thrive. This webinar today is generously supported by CapVista. CapVista is a global platform showcasing private opportunities for emerging companies across 10 countries to over 15K plus high net worth individuals, professional and international investors, family offices, and industry participants. With over 8 years of experience, CapVista has built an ecosystem to share deals and create serendipity for their investment opportunities through a variety of campaigns, promotional efforts, new distribution, and tailored matchmaking with potential investors. Thank you so much, CapVista, for supporting this webinar today. Quick housekeeping. Please note this event is being recorded. The webinar will be made available to the attendees after the event via email. Please be aware that the information provided in this webinar will be general in nature only and does not constitute personal financial advice. Before acting on any information from this presentation, you should consider how appropriate the information is in regard to your objectives, financial situation, and needs. Finally, please note this is a safe space, so you can ask any questions throughout the event by typing in the chat. I will ask our speakers some questions and we will keep 15 minutes at the end for Q&As. Now, allow me to introduce this webinar topic and our speakers. Today, we're diving into a topic I'm really excited to learn more about, investing opportunities in the circular economy and recycling. The promise of the circular economy is based on the principles of designing out of waste and pollution, keeping products and materials in use, and regenerating natural systems. We can immediately sense from this definition that many industries can stem from the circular economy. But beyond its obvious climate impact, the circular economy is also a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity worldwide. According to a recent report done by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation in 2020, the sharing economy market is expected to be worth $335 billion by 2025. And inflows in private markets are fast growing towards circular economy industries. In fact, the number of private market funds with a circular economy focus has increased tenfold since 2016. In Europe alone, a shift to a circular economy in the mobility, building, and food industries could offer annual benefits of 1.8 trillion euros. So with all that in mind, what industries and opportunities exactly are behind this big umbrella term circular economy. How can impact investors can benefit and get involved with this growth opportunity? And what positive impact can we expect from it? Today, I have the honor of hosting 3 fantastic experts on the topic who kindly agreed to join us on this panel. We have Mike Ritchie, Director of MRA Consulting, Graham Ross, co-founder of Blocktexx, and Rose Reed, CEO of the National Waste and Recycling Industry Council. Rose is having a few difficulties to join this webinar today, but she will join us as soon as she can. But before we dive in, please let me introduce you to Graham. Graham is the co-founder of Blocktexx. Graham is an entrepreneur, environmentalist, and through his world-leading focus on textile sustainability, he has founded the innovative technology company Blocktexx. He's also the CEO and founder of Kusaka Athletic, which has been awarded B Corp, Best in the World in 2017, 2018, and 2019. A quick word about Blocktexx. Through their early stage technology, Blocktexx combines chemical recovery technology and advanced manufacturing to produce high quality recycled materials. They believe that the waste management solution is effective resource recovery models, which also create Australian jobs and contribute to our manufacturing industry. Mike Ritchie. Welcome, Mike, again. I hope you can hear us.
I can, but you've blocked my video for some reason, so I'll just give you a heads up.
Okay. I'm not too sure why, but I'll fix that shortly. So Mike is the director of MRA Consulting. Mike has over 30 years experience in waste management and the recycling industry across both government and the private sector. His experience includes the role as Vice President of the Waste Management Association of Australia, and is currently a Director of Waste Management and Resource Recovery Australia. Mike, I've just made you a co-host, which should allow you to, yeah, hello, hello again. And Rose is here, which is wonderful. I will make her, give me a second to make her Mike, I think you now have a host status. Could you please make Rose a co-host as well, so she can, make her a panelist?
And also Graham too, please. I'm locked out as well.
Oh, okay. I'm really sorry. I don't know why we cannot be co-hosts together. But if you, Mike, you can probably make us panelists, and that will allow us to show our video and speak to the audience.
I've tried Rose, and now I'll try Graham.
Hello, Rose. Hello, welcome. Are you able to show your camera?
No, it's.
Oh. Okay, we've lost Rose. I'm really sorry. Yeah, really sorry for that. It's the first time we're having difficulties.
Right.
Yes, welcome again, Rose.
Right.
Mike,
Fine. The video, yeah. Anyway, I'm locked out of the video, but that's okay.
I don't know what to say. It's the first time that I'm having this issue.
Hey, doesn't matter. Let's keep going.
Okay. Mike, have you given Rose and Graham a panelist status?
Yep, they're both panelists.
Okay. All right, well, we'll kick off. That's a bit of a shame, but let's kick off anyway. So the first question I have for the panel today is, can you define what circular economy is and give a quick overview of your industry and what role it plays within the circular economy?
Go, Rose.
Oh, okay. I'm first off. Right. No worries. So circular economy is really about reducing the amount of waste being generated and keeping materials in the economy. It's also about moving towards renewable and recoverable materials rather than relying on finite resources. In terms of the National Waste and Recycling Industry Council, we have a large role to play in the recovery and recycling and returning those materials back into the economy once those products and materials have finished their initial useful life. And currently in Australia, we're recovering over 39 million tonnes of the 70 odd million tonnes of waste we generate, which is generating about 2.9 billion back into the economy just locally in Australia. That doesn't include, you know, the export revenue we're generating from the 4 million tonnes of materials we export.
Okay, and Mike, do you want to jump in as well? What's your definition of the circular economy? And I believe you are looking at waste very closely. How does that fit in within the bigger umbrella?
Well, I think you have to start by saying, what's the circular economy? The economy is very good. It's very efficient at allocating resources. It's a very linear pipe. We put new virgin material in the front and we get waste and recyclables out the bottom. The two missing things in a circular economy are better and more efficient recycling rates, and secondly, designing for reuse and recycling at the front end of the economy. The economy itself is actually quite efficient, but what's missing is design for recycling rules, design for reuse, design for repair rules. We don't have anything at the front end of our economy that says this is what you're allowed to put into the economy that can then be recovered and reused. So recyclers are end of pipe. We take what we're given and we do our best. At the moment, the recycling rate in Australia is 58%, as Rose said. We landfill about 21 million tonnes of waste and we recycle about 35 million tonnes. So we're doing pretty well, but not well enough. And the target for Australia is 80% recycling by 2030. So we need to grow our recycling rate by about 1.2 to 1.5 million tonnes per year cumulative for the next 9 years. Now, I don't think we've got any chance of doing that without having proper design rules at the front end and then building the systems to make that recycling happen. And we can talk at length about all the infrastructure needs at the back end of the economy to repurpose and reuse those materials. But it starts with designing so that stuff can be recycled, and at the moment we have no rules at all. So they're the two missing links for me in terms of our circular economy. Is we have a very linear, and we're not fixing design and we're not fixing recycling.
Thank you. That's a really great overview, and scary to think how far we are from doing better and reaching our target. I might invite Graham to jump in. So Graham on the panel is, I guess, represent part of the solution to these issues. Graham, do you want to tell us a bit more about Blocktexx and where you think you fit in within that circular economy system?
Sure, thanks, Camille. Apologies, my video doesn't seem to be working either, but let's crack on. I think that's important. So I guess plugging into, as Mike mentioned about circular economy, he's completely right. We need high recovery rates from those materials that aren't being recycled. And where Blocktexx fits into that conversation is from a textile perspective. Globally, we're very good at reusing clothing, donating to charities. There's a strong export market globally. But the volumes of materials that are created is far outstripping those industries that can handle. And what has been lacking in the industry is developing innovative technologies that can work to recover those raw materials that go into everyday clothing. And what's happened over the last 15 years, thanks to fast fashion, we now have most of our clothing is made up of a blend of fibers. It's not 100% cotton so much anymore. it's more polyester cotton, polyester nylon, spandex. And so there's been a growth of textiles into the marketplace that come with multiple fibers, and there hasn't been the level of investment into resource recovery. And so where Blocktexx sits is that we're able to recover those resources, but also inform back into that supply chain and design capabilities the materials that can be recycled at this period of time, with the view that within further investment and further working in that space, you'll be able to recover for more things. So from something it's really as simple as a lot of our shirts come with nylon buttons, and our technology focuses on polyester cotton. So obviously we have to remove the nylon buttons. But if the buttons were made out of polyester, well, then the whole thing could be recycled. So that talks very much, as Mike was saying, that we need to think about design for us to then be able to deal with it at end of life. So Blocktexx is an Australian clean technology company, and we've been focused on textile resource recovery. As I mentioned, there is high levels of reuse in export markets around the world, and that's fairly mature. But what isn't mature is the recovery of those raw materials to come back into supply chains. So what we've done here in Australia is we've developed a chemical separation process that focuses on polyester cotton blended fabrics. So what are they? They are your bedding, your linen, your napkins, your pants, your tops, even your favorite t-shirt. So we've developed a chemical separation process that effectively unlocks the cotton from the polyester. And through some advanced manufacturing, we're able to then remanufacture the polyester into raw PET, so the raw materials that can then go back into polyester fiber, or can go back into injection molding, or go back into geofabrics. And the cotton is then manufactured into a cellulose powder. And the cellulose powder can go back into fiber spinning, go back into another cotton shirt, or importantly, it's used in many industries. So building industry, it's used in manufacturing, it's used in cosmetics, and used in pharmaceuticals. And so one of the things really important from this perspective is, and we talk from circular economy, we are taking a waste, but the waste isn't our priority. It's a priority from the point of view we want good quality feedstock, but importantly, it's the recycled materials going back into industry. And when I mentioned PET and I mentioned cellulose powder, a lot of those materials are imported in this country. And so by recovering those resources here in this country, we're able to then feed into the manufacturing industry and obviously make that a little bit more robust.
Graham, if you try your video, it might work now.
Oh, there we are.
Hello, we have everyone. Sorry.
It might have been better in black, but here I am.
Thank you so much, Graham. Great answer, and great, I guess, sneak peek to the fashion and textile industry. My follow-up question actually is on the investment landscape. The audience, a lot of people in the audience are impact investors, and I would love to unpack how wide and varied the investment landscape is for circular economy. So can one of you jump in and unpack the industries that are, I guess, right for the circular economy opportunity? Can be Rose or Mike.
Yeah, I might just quickly kick off. I suppose when you think about impact, can you hear me? Yeah. Sorry, it's got a bit of a delay. I'll just take my video off to make it easy. Can you hear me okay now? Yep.
Yes.
Okay. I suppose in terms of impact investing, you need to look at, well, where are the opportunities within Australia from a material perspective? And in terms of the 20 odd million still going to landfill, organics and plastics are probably some of the biggest areas where there is opportunity for more materials to be recovered. So there's that aspect of it. The other aspect of it is further processing and refining materials that are currently being recovered to higher quality products. And this is where you're seeing plastics, tires, e-waste, and so on. And that's where you will see a shift from, the dollar value per tonne of that recovered material increasing by, going from $100 a tonne to $800 a tonne, of that sort of order, I suppose, depending on the material type. So, adding value to those secondary materials is the other opportunity. And that would be, once again, in some of the mixed plastics area, in the paper area, and also similarly within organics, going from a compost to a more refined fertilizer. So, and then there's the whole raft of, there's, in terms of building materials, I don't know if the scale of impact is as high, but there is a lot of material coming out of commercial and industrial, where this is where the fabrics and other things are important. So I'll leave it to the other guys to jump in to fill in some of the other detail.
Thank you, Rose.
My bad. In terms of scale, of the 20 million tonnes going to landfill, 10 million tonnes is organics. So there's no doubt that organics processing is a massive growth area. We've got what's called food and garden organics processing bins going to many households in Australia now. We've got about 100 councils out of the 570 that are now introducing food bins to receive food and garden organics as a combined stream. So there's massive growth in the composting, soil sequestration of compost, biochar. Anything that gets organics back onto land is a growth area, in spite of the fact we don't have a carbon price in this country. But there's no doubt that within 5 to 10 years, we'll have a carbon price, even if it's a shadow price imposed by Europe. So anything that diverts organics from landfill is an area worth investing in. Similarly, energy from waste, massive growth area. People don't want landfills in their backyards, so we're seeing at least 10 new proposals across the country for energy from waste, both big scale, but also some attempts at smaller gasifiers at the 50 to 100,000 tonne scale. We're building 2 energy from waste plants in Perth, 400,000 tonnes each, about $400, $500 million each. And as I said, there's about another 8 proposals rolling around the rest of the country. So in terms of big infrastructure, anything that sorts municipal waste or sorts commercial waste, with landfill levies driving upwards, there's now the headroom for recyclers to compete in some of those mixed waste streams, energy from waste, organics. Then you drop down a level to products that are subject to extended producer responsibility rules or laws, like solar panels are coming, lithium batteries, textiles, as Graham's mentioned, soft plastic, that, those streams are all now subject to EPR schemes, or are going to be, fibre, paper, cardboard. And then you drop down another level to the more bespoke individual stream and individual commodity type. And really, for investors, those people are going to come to you and you're going to say, should I invest in this or not? And that's more of a due diligence assessment of that specific bespoke company and technology. And we always advise our clients to go and get advice around those. But in terms of those bigger streams, they're almost inevitable, because they're the interface between waste generation and public policy, in the form of either landfill levies, bans from landfill, or carbon pricing. And so they move everything in those spaces. Now, we're not where we need to be, but certainly if you look at a 5 to 10 year horizon, you're going to see expansion around those streams, I said. As for the new entrant with a bespoke technology, do your due diligence.
Thank you, Mike. I really love the fact that you bring legislation to the topic. I think it's an important driver that investors have to keep in mind. On that, actually, it's a good segue to my next question. In your respective industry, so I guess I'm going to say Mike, waste, Rose, recycling, and Graham, upcycling.
No, don't say that.
Recycling. How do you feel about Australia's position in the global context? In your respective industries, do you feel behind? Do you feel pioneers? Can you tell us more about the global context? In terms of growth and in terms of...
Maybe I'll jump in.
Go, Graham.
I can certainly come in from Sorry, thanks, Rose. From a textile point of view, Blocktexx is one of a very small selected handful of chemical recyclers of textiles. It's an emerging industry. It's needed an investment. It's also needed some time to mature the technology and for an understanding of where the market is going. There's a strong demand from the global fashion textile market for recycled materials. The early money to date has flowed into single fibre, focused on cotton, and so those have gone to market. I think that's mainly be driven from a marketing perspective because the technology was more advanced, and there was an opportunity to take that 100% cotton and bring that into a fashion line. The reality is, most of our clothes is a blend of polyester and cotton, and that's what we need to focus on to recover those resources. As I said, I'm purely talking about end-of-life textiles. If your favourite shirt can be reused again and again, that's the best way of a circular economy. But when we're talking about when it's loved to death, ripped, torn, and stained, that's where Blocktexx can help. I guess from an Australian perspective, the federal government recently announced that textiles is one of their priority waste streams coming on after the banned waste streams, which is exciting. We have from a market perspective, dealing with waste initially, we have about 1 million tonnes of textile waste going to landfill. That's over the last sort of 5 years, year on year. Australians, we import more than 1 million items of clothing each year. We're one of the highest buyers of clothing per capita around the world. If you think but we're a small drop in the ocean. We think about globally. China's about 20 million tonnes of textile waste. The US is about 14 million. But where I think is really important, where we kind of need to think about, whilst we don't want things going to landfill, we've got to look forward into what are the technologies and what are the market drivers for us to start to really drive this circular economy. And so we think of a perspective like, so polyester is made out of PET. So there's about 70 million tonnes of raw PET manufactured each year, and about 20 million tonnes goes into bottles and packaging, and 50 million tonnes goes into textiles. Now we all, as Rose and Mike, we say we are really advanced in our plastics recovery from those point of view. But from a textile point of view, out of that 50 million tonnes of raw material, we're recovering about 1%. So there's a huge uptake. But what's really interesting from the perspective you think about investing, we've got two large industries, the plastics industry, the bottles, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Danone, and they're all saying we're going to be 100% recycled. And we've got Nike, Adidas, all the major brands saying they're going to be 100% recycled by 2025, 2030. Recycled polyester in our clothing comes from bottles at this present moment. That is where the technology is led, but the demand is increasing year on year. And what we now got is two large industries fighting over the same sort of feedstock. So where the investment opportunity is, and I'm not trying to blow my own trumpet because there is a huge opportunity here, is for the recovery of the polyester and cotton and getting that polyester textile to textile into the marketplace. So I think that's really exciting. And I think talking to what Mike was saying before, at this stage, our technology focuses on polyester cotton, as does they're not necessarily our competitors because we're all trying to do the right thing here. We need lots of feedstock, and that will allow us to build a robust business model, prove out the technology, that sort of stuff. At the moment, textiles are sorted by hand. It's not efficient. And also the textiles are now, because of reuse, they're sorted into pants and tops and skirts and those sorts of things. Textile recyclers need the clothing sorted into fibres. Now, we need to make that automated. So there is some early stage automated sortation systems coming online, but they need further investment to speed up the process for us to really realise those resource recovery technologies.
Thank you, Graham. I might jump into another question that will bring back the conversation on the finance level. So we've been through growth opportunities, and there are so many waste, upcycling, and so many industries that are part of the circular economy. But can you tell us a bit more about investment vehicles? How can Australia invest in recycling and waste? What are the different instruments that we can use to drive this industry forward?
So you're talking about different types of loans, Camille, is that what you're looking at?
As an investor, what options exist? So I imagine direct equity investment in early stage innovative companies is one. We think about municipal bonds. How can we bring capital to that industry?
Well, I think what's interesting about the investment is, there's different levels of investment. There's either multi-million-dollar facilities, and that might be a debt or an equity approach. If you think about look at the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, the approach they've taken has, driven some great returns, but they're also investing in large-scale facilities, and that applies to, say, some of the energy recovery facilities. Energy recovery, from a legislative and policy perspective, is quite uncertain, let me put it that way. And there's a lot of social issues in that one. But coming back to the financing side of things, as to how you provide, so there's the large scale investment, but there's also lots of smaller scale investment opportunities, under the $1 million mark, I suppose, which is more of some of the bespoke work, but can actually probably have substantial impact. And if you are thinking about circular economy, we actually have to invest in different ways of doing things. There's more ways. There's some different initiatives to try and increase recovering more of what we're throwing out. But we also need to invest in activities that actually mean that we're not throwing out stuff, we're actually keeping stuff for longer. And so new business models. And so looking at and opportunities to invest in new business models. And I suppose trying to find, and part of that is also material substitution, investing in development of materials that are more easily, because if you look at plastics, for instance, we have a raft of plastics, of which half of those are very difficult to handle, to recover, to process. So let's replace those with materials that are more. So there's lots of. So I'm not there. That's a bit of a mix because I'm not an expert in financial constructs, I suppose. But there is issues about scale of funding, and there are some good investments where you can have big impacts that are at a small scale, but there's also those larger ones, and they would be through the traditional loan and debt and equity models. But I said, and say for instance, even through the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, you think about how they partner with they'll invest funds in other, private equity to make small loans available to individual homes or to at that smaller scale. Say the rate setter model is a good example.
Thank you, Rose.
Just our perspective, taking on from where Rose left, we have a list of target companies. We often get asked by everyone from superannuation, private equity, banks, investors, capital investment houses. We all want to get into waste. It's got good solid returns. It's counter-cyclical to the property market. It's regulatory based. It's been driven by landfill taxes. So lots of tons are being directed out of landfill and back into the productive economy. How do we invest in that space? So we get lots of those twice a week. And then we have a list as MRA of target companies that we know are interested in scaling up, that are in need of capital, that have got a good idea or just need to mobilise investment. And we try and match those. And there's a couple, and we do that as a consultancy. There's a couple of other groups that do something similar. Boomerang Labs, some of your members might have heard of Energy Labs. They're now migrating into that small investment space. Definitely that kind of $0 to $2 million investment horizon. But, we equally get asked to do due diligence around $2.5 billion private equity investments in the space. So it's happening at all scales. It depends entirely on the target market of the people on this call, whether they're in that smaller bespoke market or whether they're in the big publicly listed company market. And the one other thing I would mention is capital grants. Most state governments now offer capital grants for new investment in new capital, and they're generally up to $5 million. And if you're a startup company and you get a grant for 5 million from the government guaranteed, you can easily walk into a bank and say, I've got 50% of my equity guaranteed, give me a loan for the other 5 million, and away we go. We've got $10 million seed funding. So that's the approach we take. And everything from 0 to 5 million up for companies is a great way to get in, is to go and bid for a government grant if you can get one. And particularly if you're in some of those spaces that we mentioned before, tyres, fibre, plastic, glass, any of the banned materials that are subject to the export ban, there are grants around at the moment for those. But if you're in a new bespoke area, as Rose mentioned, doing something very innovative, then there's always innovation grants around as well. Not generally as generous, usually up to $500,000, but again, a nice way to get some working capital.
Thank you, Mike. That was a comprehensive answer. I might actually ask Graham, about the funding and finance aspect of your business. Can you share with us your journey? How have you founded your innovation so far?
Thanks. It's been interesting. It's been a whole new world, both in conversations here in this country and also internationally. The original company was bootstrapped by myself and my business, so we put in our hard sweat capital, and that's generally the way I found. We then took some seed investment from a high net worth individual who thoroughly believed that there needed to fund a business that was doing so. Part was through a venture capitalist. We're currently going through a Series A round. We were one of those lucky companies that had almost closed, and then there was this thing called the global pandemic hit, and that kiboshed any sort of foreign investment, and that's predominantly where it was coming from. The challenge we found that Australia's got a very robust, as Rose and Mike mentioned, grant opportunities. We found, because we're looking for large capital expenditure, some of that was a challenge for us to get to, and some of the grants we looked at in the early stages they didn't reach those sorts of monetary. Higher amounts were predicated on more of an existing business, and so we kind of fell through the gaps there. And but equally, the VCs we talked to in the early stage, there was a lot of money for soft tech. Hard tech, if you mentioned you wanted to build a factory, people were running out the door. So I think that's maybe something that's an opportunity for people to think about. What we have found in this journey of Series A raising, that there is more interest in circular economy focused businesses, more interest in sustainability business, more business who are thinking about how can we deliver, sustainable goals to either large companies or create products that then can be carried on through the thing. So it is slowly changing. I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but certainly the government is coming to the party. Federally, state, there is grants available. There is a risk profile for a company like ours, certainly in this country. And then we have found internationally, and we have travelled internationally for conversations, and a lot of interest. But the fact that we're in Australia we fell through the cracks in regards to sort of mandates for those funds, which is really disappointing. And I guess, given the fact that we've all lived vicariously through computers and run our businesses like that, the fact that we as a society still find barriers for work to get going. If the innovation, the technology exists in one country, let's get it up and prove it in that market, and then take it out of that country and scale it globally. And I think there's a huge opportunity for that, and there's a willingness for that. Those early investors at this stage will certainly reap some rewards going forward.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing, and congratulations on your perseverance. It's a journey. I'm going to finish with one question for each and every one of you, and then we'll jump into Q&A with the audience. So we're going to play a game. Imagine you have, let's say, $500,000 to invest in the circular economy. Where would you invest that money? Do you have companies that you do really like or that you would love to support? Who wants to go first?
Okay.
I'll actually dip out of this. It's not my area. I'm not.
Well,
So I'd probably invest in horses.
I probably couldn't do it for $500,000, but I would definitely do organics. Organics is half of all the tonnes to landfill. It's something Australia has not addressed. Europe banned organics to landfill in 1990, year 2000. We have, it's currently 10 million tonnes. It's almost impossible to collect commercial food in a viable, at-scale way at the moment. It's just still too cheap to landfill it. And government have to address the 3% of emissions that come from our landfill stock. So I see organics being a great way to sequester carbon, reduce emissions, meet a lot of the international obligations under Paris. So I would say if I had a spare, it wouldn't be for $500,000, but certainly I'd get into composting and or biochar to produce a high quality activated carbon. If I was looking for a piece of technology, it'd probably be in pyrolysis.
Thank you, Mike.
Or composting, of course.
I like that you highlight both the opportunity and the impact. It's great. How about you, Graham?
Well, if we weren't putting $500,000 into Blocktexx, I'd think something like. I think more like the fact that we do need to transition away from polyester clothing at some stage. That's not going to happen in the short term, but something we need to look at. So look at what are those bio fabrics that can perform like a polyester. We've done some work, and there's some good work being done here in this country around algae. Interesting application across many industries. Algae is already in the commercial space within footwear soles at this present moment. So, I think there's great opportunities in fibre. There's certainly other opportunities for the algae, and I think that's a really exciting space.
Thank you so much. So it is time to dive into the Q&As from the audience, and there are some great questions. So the first one is, could the panel offer 3 key inspirational initiatives that guarantee local community buy-in under recovery of resource considerations? How can we engage with local communities?
Well, I'll give you the one obvious one. It's local communities saying we want a food and garden organics bin. It is unbelievable how many mayors and councillors don't go to collecting and separating their food and garden organics because they're not sure what the community reaction will be. I encourage people to go into guerrilla processing of their food by just adding it to their green waste bin, because we need to get councils to move in that space. It's 3% of Australia's emissions. It's 9 million tonnes of CO2e. It's equivalent of 2 million cars driving on our road. And the farmers are missing out on all that compost and all that organics. It's way beyond time that we introduced food and garden organics at every house in Australia, and that's something that every household plays a role in. Thank
you. Any other comments? Otherwise, I'll dive into other questions.
I'll just jump in on that. I think what's quite interesting is the recent IQ Renew Nestle program to trial soft plastics collections using a yellow plastic, basically getting people to consolidate and aggregate all the plastics into soft plastics into one bag, and then put it into the yellow bin. That's proven to be a very successful trial. It's not an easy thing to do. I've tried it in the past with electronics, or mobile phones and those sorts of things. So I think that was, that there is a desire. I think the community is keen to do that. They do want to recycle more, and it seems that that's worked quite well. So I think that's an interesting thing as well. Mm-hmm. The other area that's the key, is where there's a lot of buy-in and growing, is the repair cafes, tool libraries, and those sorts of things. It's a different approach. This is the other end of the circular economy that we need to look at. So it's not so pertinent to the National Waste and Recycling Industry Council, but more broadly, there is that desire to do that. I don't know how good it is in terms of return on investment, but in terms of community buy-in, there is interest there.
So certainly an impactful investment, I'm sure. We have a bit of a technical question from Stephen. who asks, have the panelists have any view on the EPA's view on classifying anaerobic digestate as industrial waste, which prohibits its uses as biological fertilizer?
No, there are no, well, particularly in New South Wales, which I know well, there are no limits on the use of the digestate material as long as it complies with the resource recovery orders and exemptions in New South Wales, which it does. I mean, if you look at the Earth Power facility, they take their digestate and they use it on farms. So in accordance with the appropriate resource recovery order and exemption. So I don't think that's an issue. Similarly, the AD plant operating in Perth with Ritchie, Yarra Valley Water in Melbourne, all of those use digestate, or take the digestate and use it on land. So it would be a rare event that you would contaminate the digestate enough that you couldn't use it on land as a fertiliser. It would have to be heavily contaminated with PFAS or heavy metals, and you know, as long as it's properly sourced from restaurants, etc., it won't have those materials in it.
Thank you, Mike. We have a question from Paula, and this question is for Graham. How big is the textile waste problem in Australia and globally, and what percentage do you think Blocktexx can address?
Nice big question. So Australia, I think I mentioned before, Australia's got about 1 million tonnes of textile waste going into landfill. Now that's both personal clothing, but also commercial waste. Globally, it's predicted by 2030, and it's a staggering figure, there'll be 140 million tonnes of textile waste in landfills around the world. Now, Blocktexx is, we've built a scalable and modular facility. And so our sizing capabilities is only sort of held back by the investment dollars effectively. So we're in the process, the aim is that we'll have our first commercial scale facility up running by the end of the year, and it will do a 3,800 tonnes per annum. So it's a drop in the ocean, but it is a start. And I think this is the most important thing when we talk about circular economy. It's, yes, we can have these big goals and whatever, but the most important thing is to start. And if that's starting with you sorting your waste properly, making sure that you're taking your textiles to the reuse centres first and foremost, but then also looking for those other options. So if you do have textile waste, it can actually go into some sort of resource recovery process if it's available. So it's a huge problem for the waste, but like I said, there is an equally large demand for those recovered resources, not only here in this country, but as an export opportunity. And so we could pick Blocktexx up and put it in any country in the world, and there'll be more than enough feedstock for us to run our plant, and equally there'll be the capacity would equally have as much demand. So I think that's a really exciting thing. Like I said, we're catching up. The other banned waste streams have been doing this for a long time, and textiles are late to the party. But I guess that's where the opportunity is. And what I'm excited about is that we are talking about circular economy much more seriously. The government is investing. We're also seeing large corporations look at, certainly here in Australia, look at their workwear uniforms, wonder why are they being buried, why are they being thrown into landfill. There's security issues. It doesn't make any sense when you can recycle those, recover those fibres back, and reduce your carbon emissions.
Thank you, Mike. Great answer. Thank you, Graham. Sorry, great answer. One more question about challenges. So Sophia asks, what are the current challenges that are hindering the growth of the recycling technologies in textiles, organics, etc.? That might be a question for Rose or Mike. What are the key blocks for this?
I'll start by saying the economics are broken in Australia. Unless you've got an incredibly innovative technology that supercharges the value transfer or the value added to a piece of waste, then you can't overcome the reverse logistics costs. That's the problem with waste in this country. It's very cheap to landfill it, aggregate it, mix it, you know, who cares, blung it all together, stick it in a bin and landfill it. And until you change that, the only people who can break into that supply chain are people like Graham, who've got an incredibly strong value-added proposition with a piece of technology. Now, of course, we'll get some of those, but they're very bespoke and small scale, and good on them. The more we have, the better. But it's not transformative in the sense of the 20 million tonnes. We have to fundamentally change the economic equation in this country. And there's only a couple of mechanisms to do that. Europe said, well, we'll ban a bunch of this stuff from landfill, or we'll price it via landfill taxes. And that will create the headroom for an awful lot more recyclers to come into that space with their technologies that may be not as value accretive as others, but they can still make a margin and compete with the opportunity cost of landfilling. And that's what we need. And in Australia, we don't have a price signal as far as carbon is concerned. We still have relatively cheap landfills. The innovation is happening in those states where they have a $146 landfill tax. And we have no bans on waste to landfill of any substance across the country. So if you want to fast track this, you either fund innovation to build more Graham's technologies, you have a landfill tax, or you have bans on material to landfill to create the space for innovators. They're the big substantive levers that are not currently being pulled, but we have a federal government that is prepared to look at those now for the first time in a long time.
And I think adding on to that, Mike, is the incentives to drive reuse of recovered secondary materials in products and construction projects. So, looking to, for instance, in Europe, there is now a plastics tax on virgin plastics. Yeah. So if you've got, if you're using a secondary plastic, then you're avoiding that tax. So that's another initiative that needs to be done. And I think the other barrier, and you touched on it, is logistics. That is a big cost in terms of our current model. So, and the problem is we don't have very, we might have smart trucks and all the rest of it, but we're not thinking in terms of how we collect and handle and transport material. It is very much the cheapest way. So there needs to be some incentives to break that logistics economics model, because it is a really massive barrier and does not drive any innovation in reverse logistics. And I've had many years chasing logistics providers to try and, move mobile phones around. And, unless you've got some better incentives there, that's still going to be a big barrier.
Yeah, no company's going to volunteer to lose money. So until we change that and make it profitable for companies to do the right thing, we're beating our heads against the wall. And I mean, I'll give you an example. Government's pulling through and procuring. That helps lower those barriers. If people have got a guaranteed market with known beneficial tenders that say we will give credit and extra points to people who purchase recycled asphalt or people who buy recycled concrete, those kinds of issues, they all help. We've got to do more of that. But in terms of the big levers, it's price, it's regulation, it's EPR schemes. You can't educate your way to sustainability, for example. You can throw all the money you like at education, but it's not going to get us there. We need to build big bits of kit and create the market economics for innovators to come into the space. And we're averagely good at it and averagely bad.
Yeah. Yeah, and procure, and where government is the most effective is through regulation and procurement. They're the two most effective tools.
Thank you so much. I think that's unfortunately all the time we have for today, but thank you so much, Mike, Graham and Rose, for answering questions from our audience. I think today was a really rich discussion. We had an opportunity to highlight how exciting investing in circular economy and recycling is, but also we had an opportunity to dive into the challenges and how this industry is facing some regulatory and industry challenges. I hope everyone in the audience is feeling inspired, and that we gave you practical knowledge and insights into how impact investing can be powerful and how you can get involved with it. One last few words. Our group, this meetup group of impact investors, keep growing. We are now 800 members, and this is so fabulous to see. But I would love your help to grow it even further. So if you know anyone who would love to be involved, share the event today and invite them to join. One last item. So Graham is obviously leading Blocktexx and innovation in that space. If people want to, after this call, if people want to get in touch with Graham, they can, I will share Graham's details in an email with the recording. But if you want more information about Blocktexx investment plans, you can also reach out to Cape Vista. Graham, do you want to say a word about this, or have I said it all?
You've covered it quite well. As I said, we're closing our Series A round to build a world first textile resource recovery facility in Australia. The technology is being developed here in the country. Very strong feedstock market. We've got a strong demand market here in this country, and we need some investment to get there. We're very close to closing the round, and we're not. It's not a crowdfunding, so we're looking for serious investors to realise this opportunity. And this is the stage one to many stages, and there's an opportunity that, you know, hopefully Blocktexx will have a place in every state around the country, because there's certainly the opportunity there.
Yeah. Thank you, Graham. Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Coming today and making the time and commitment to learn and be curious. By learning and choosing to support impact investing and sustainable finance, we can truly create positive impact at scale. Thank you again, Mike, Graham, and Rose, for your time and expertise. I wish you a wonderful afternoon, and I hope to see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Well,
thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you.
thank you. Bye.